Andrew are here, but mostly Disney is the name of the podcast here to play. Laugh along to what they say. So tune in, grab your mouse ears, let's all give a cheer for Disney. Times are here.
Hey guys, and welcome to the But Mostly Disney podcast. As always, I'm Tater. Can't even say my own name, but my buddy Andrew, who's usually on the other end, is off on special assignment. So I've got my friend Hawk filling in for him tonight. That's you.
Good evening. It is.
Really,
ready to go and very excited.
Well-oiled machine around here, but we love it that way. And I know I didn't get to see Hawk this time on our trip. I am halfway between. Well, I'll be home tomorrow, back in Virginia, so we stopped in Jacksonville just to do the podcast and hang out here. And tonight I'm really excited because our guest, James Bohn, I know my wife's like, are you really going to say that? I'm like, I kind of have to, like, she's like, he's heard it 1,000 times. I know, but I have to say it. And he's really fascinating. Author, composer, and I found him through an actual college lecture that he did on It's a Small World, and I was riveted, reached out, and we've been chatting back and forth, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. So hello.
Hi, everybody.
So, and Jim's listened to a few episodes. I think tell us a little bit about yourself, and because I can't even begin to cover all that you've done. And then after that, why don't you go ahead and, like, I assume you love Disney. And if you do, like, what's kind of your Disney origin story? How did you end up being a Disney fan?
Okay, so I'm a college professor. I teach music theory and music technology at a small Catholic college called Stonehill College in Massachusetts. And in 2008, a long time ago, I came up with the idea of a course on Disney and music. And that course eventually led to me writing a book called Music and Disney's Animated Features, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs to the Jungle Book. And it's become my area of research. So I present at conferences and all sorts of stuff like that. In terms of my Disney origin story, my dad's parents retired to Arcadia, Florida, which is about a 2 or 3 hour drive south from Orlando. And so we would visit Disney World every year, both on the way down to my grandparents and on the way back. And so I don't remember it, but I was on Disney property before it opened, because August of 1971, my parents stopped at the preview center to buy tickets and reservations for the following year.
Wow.
So during my childhood, we were going almost every year for basically my whole childhood. And, we were one of the first, when the Disney Channel came out, we subscribed to that pretty much immediately. And, Disney News, which was a short-lived magazine in the 80s, we subscribed to that. So the whole 9 yards,
I love it. I mean, and to say you were on there before it opened, like, that's pretty cool. Not a lot of folks can say that. Because I don't think my first.
Yeah, I wish I could remember it, but but I think my brother says he can remember it. But
wow, that's neat. That's really neat. Well, tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea for these Disney lectures with music. I mean, obviously, there's so much music. I mean, it's a really prolific catalog to go through, right? I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of stuff, and music is a huge part of, I think, anybody who loves Disney. I mean, the music is what, I listen to this music while I work, right? Like, while I'm doing paperwork, I will put these loops on in the background and listen to them constantly.
And Sean, one of the things I want to add that I thought was really cool when I was reading up on Jim's background, a lot of people will state the origin of Disney and Disney magic was drawn, right? And Jim, you really come from the angle that magic is composed and the artistry actually kind of follows suit to that.
Mm.
Is that a correct perspective of kind of your thought process? Because I'm fascinated by that. Like that's really what I want to ask you about is if people say it's based on the artwork and you believe it's based much deeper in actual composition, can you explain that theory?
Yeah. So if you think back to the very beginning, it all started with a mouse, right? There were two Mickey Mouse cartoons that came before Steamboat Willie, but they didn't go anywhere. And as a last ditch effort, Walt decided to try and do a sound cartoon. And it wasn't until Mickey Mouse was paired with sound that Mickey Mouse was successful. And in the early Mickey cartoons, he's like always a musician. He's always conducting something. He's always playing piano or playing some musical instrument. And it's that synchronization between the animation and the music, which was novel at the time, that really kind of birthed the genre. And, one of these great kind of stories about how the Disney studio kind of started to operate is that when they recorded the score for Steamboat Willie, they had to hire like 5 sound effects people, and Walt didn't like having to pay that many people, so he wrote a memo saying like from now on try and incorporate as many of the sound effects into the musical score as possible. So that kind of became the sound of the Disney studio, where like when Mickey Mouse takes steps, you hear like a cello plucking or a violin plucking rather than having the sound
Ah.
effect of him stepping. And that sort of close synchronization between music and visual is so identifiable that it's called Mickey Mousing. And after the Mickey Mouse cartoons became popular, they made the silly symphonies because Carl Stalling wanted there to be a cartoon series where the music came first and the animation followed the music. And then when they got to, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, there's, you know, sound motion pictures had really only existed for less than a decade at that point. It was a brand new genre. It was like virtual reality is to us today, more or less. And almost that entire film has music behind it through the whole thing. There's no moment in that movie where there isn't music. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's really just an animated opera or an operetta. There's my favorite example is the song with a smile and a song. After she's done singing that, there's legitimate scene change music when she walks to the dwarves cottage. You hear the same melody that just played and muted trumpets and that's exactly what you get if it was a stage musical. And Snow White and Seven Dwarfs was so successful. If you look at all the Disney films, again, not counting Pixar, but all the Disney films, there are very few of them that aren't essentially musicals.
That's true.
We look at the audience for these films as being families, and families, of course, include children. And you know, there's people who don't really like musicals, and I guess one of the things that people may not understand is that with musicals, the songs externalize the character's inner thoughts. So, like, a kid doesn't have to wonder what Snow White's thinking because she's just going to sing it to you, right? You don't have to wonder what Cinderella's wishing for because she's just going to tell you, right? And so the music, helps people understand the plot better, helps a younger audience understand the plot, helps them understand who are the good characters and who are the bad characters. And, it's the thing you take away from the movie. When if Frozen is your favorite movie, you're probably singing, one of the songs from the movies all the time rather than sketching the characters.
That is so true. And I mean, and as you say it, like I'm thinking, I mean, what a great question, Hawk, by the way. I mean, but as you're saying that, it's like common sense. Like as you're saying it, it makes so much sense to pave that road that way, and then think back to. I mean, of course it is. I mean, if you want to make someone feel something, do a nice slideshow of their life. But if you want to make them cry, add a song, right? I mean, that really puts it over the edge. And I had not thought about how much that goes into that creation. And then, again, going backwards, 2020, it makes perfect sense. The Sherman Brothers, George Bruns, all these people that Walt kept around who put these movies together. And you're right. I can't draw a dwarf, but I can whistle while I work all day long.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, another side of that, because you're speaking of the emotional connection that your music is bringing to the audience. Obviously, somewhat focused on kids at the time. However, everyone's obviously enjoying it. It's a whole new aspect of communication through visual presentation with music. So that whole aspect going through the early years, do you think was Disney making that emotional connection better than anybody else? Because obviously through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, more and more musicals came out, more and more people started to, ride the hot popular train. As we always do, as technology advances, everybody jumps on board. What set Disney apart for you that really made that the focus of your research, and what was Disney doing differently that the copycats were missing?
Well, I guess the thing is that for Disney, it's all pervasive. The other film studios that do musicals, it's a tiny little part of what they do. But, Sean just came back from Disney World, this massive complex that's built on the intellectual property of mainly animated films. And those animated films are built off of songs, more or less. I mean, there's, if you explain to a non-Disney person, like, oh, I go to this place and they're blasting songs from Disney movies all the time, they're going to think, aren't you going to get sick of that? But of course, no Disney fan gets sick of that, right?
Right.
It really draws us in and it pulls us in, and it's that background music is a part of the experience. I swear that if you were to walk down Main Street and turn off the background music, it would be at least 25% less fun, if not 50% less fun.
Yes.
It's just like, when you walk into a Disney park, you're walking into a movie, and the score is the thing in the movie that sets the pacing. So if it's slow music, the pacing's slow. If it's fast, upbeat music, the pacing is fast and upbeat.
Or even like the transitions. Like one of my favorite things in all of Disney World is walking past Crystal Palace and into Adventureland. And I probably play the Tomorrowland loop at home more than I do Adventureland, but really that's my favorite. And I think about how magical that transition is. And part of that is how the music just creeps right in. And the next thing you know, you're surrounded by these it's completely transformative in a matter of 20, 30 feet, 2 bars, a couple notes. And the next thing you know, you're somewhere else.
Yeah. And, it's simple technology, but in terms of the scale of it, it's massive in terms of it's basically this gigantic art installation where you have speakers that are aimed in specific spots, and there's loops of music going on that kind of intensify the experience, and the audience moves through the space, moving through the music and so on and so forth, to kind of sculpt their own experience of that adventure, so to speak.
I've never thought of it from that realm before, but as I'm sitting here thinking of what you just said, Disney could make movies without music and probably still on occasion pull it off. But Disney World without music would be a failure. like as you said that, I was like, that really is the defining difference with how skilled they are at creating that musical moment around you while you're in the parks everywhere you go. That it's just incredible to me. That's a great point.
Well, and then I think too, I mean, think about Fantasia, which is, I mean, that's almost like the elephant in the room, right? Like that movie was literally music and they took it and put it together. And then Walt wanted to create whole theaters with speakers. Like we went and saw, I'm not a Vegas person. I don't gamble. I don't drink. It's just not my brand, but it's spectacle, right? It's amazing. And I do want to go to the Sphere and hear their sound system. But what I do love, and we kept having these company trips I'd win, so we've been a bunch, is the Beatles Love Show. And we went and saw that, and those speakers were designed for that music and for that room. And it was just incredible, right? And if I could go see Fantasia in the Sphere, like, can you imagine what they could do with that? It would be incredible and really bring Walt's whole vision full circle for that, right? Yeah, and the syncing, right? I mean, think about like even riding Spaceship Earth, how you have each cart has its own show going on, a few feet apart. And yes, sometimes there's a little bleed over on whatever's going on, but like all of the technical side of what they do is pretty incredible. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, because someone brought it up in the chat. This kind of brings me to one of the lectures I'm kind of known for, where I talk about It's a Small World. And people who disparage It's a Small World and the song are really only listening to like the theme, but every single area has a different variation of that theme. Now,
Right.
because of the way things work, they all have to be essentially in the same key and essentially in the same tempo. But if you compare the bagpipe variation to like the Middle Eastern variation to my favorite one, the South Pacific one,
Mm.
they're all very different. And any other, if an artist had created this, imagine like reading in the newspaper that there's this immersive space that has hundreds of speakers in it with 30 different musical variations going on simultaneously, and that the audience travels through those variations in space rather than in time. You'd think like this is the most avant-garde thing you've ever heard of, but that's what Disney did, and they did it in 1964 using, to our contemporary palette, extremely simple technology. Now, of course, at the time, 30 channels of audio was not the easiest thing to do, but it also wasn't super trailblazing either. It was just taking technology that existed and thinking, oh, if we just put the speakers in each set and sent a different variation to each, but have them all synced up, it's going to be this seamless experience. And what I challenge people to do, people who are not convinced, next time you go on It's a Small World, focus on the bagpipe variation because it's the easiest one to identify. Like, where's the first moment where you can hear it, and when do you stop hearing it? And then, you can focus on, hearing it appear and hearing it disappear, and, how you'll be hearing several variations at the same time, and it all makes musical sense. And it's actually a very sophisticated musical thing that they're doing. But you're really not going to appreciate it unless you listen for the differences between the variation rather than the melody.
Yeah, and it's well, look, I have my heritage is Scottish, so that the bagpipe, it's the bagpipe in South Pacific, it's just the Polynesian part. That drum beat in there is one of my favorite things in the whole world. Like what that sound is so Disney to me. But I do listen to the bagpipes, and it's funny you mentioned that because when we wrote it this week, it was lower than usual, and I noticed. Like I noticed it didn't carry as far. Maybe a glitch or something was different, but the bagpipe one is always one that I'm watching the bagpiper, and then you get it right at that corner. I can tell you the spot where it comes in. I know exactly what you're talking about. All right. So I was just thinking of this as you were talking about that. With this kind of success, and look, I strum guitar, and I took a few lessons from a buddy, and he was like, look, at this point, if you're going to get better, you're going to have to really study and learn some theory. And that was about when my ship sailed for musical talent. But it seems like there's a pretty consistent calculus or math to the music, right? Is there a formula that Disney uses repeatedly for creating these anthems or soundtracks or something that gets us, or is it truly art, or are the art and the math intertwined? Then does it not make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, they hire really talented people to do this, and even people who have a sound, the sound changes from piece to piece. Like I see a lot of people say there's such a thing as a Disney sound, and I don't think that's true at all. There's
No.
no such thing as a Disney sound. And even if you take the Sherman Brothers in 1964, they're working on Mary Poppins, but they're also working on Summer Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And if you listen to those two scores back to back, there's really nothing in common with them. Part of it is because they're using different orchestrators. Mary Poppins uses, Irwin Kostal, and Summer Magic uses Buddy Baker. But even if you were to take two Sherman Brothers films scored by the same person, these are professionals. They're going to treat a film that's set in 1900 different than a film set in 1920, different from a film set in 1940, and so forth. So they're going to kind of custom tailor it to the event. But to a certain extent, Lin-Manuel Miranda, there's a little bit that always sounds a little bit like Lin-Manuel Miranda, and the Alan Menken, there's a little bit that's always like Alan Menken, but there's still a lot of breadth in those, the Alan Menken scores and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. I mean, look, I have a little bit of a Sherman Brother bias, right? But if you put even their pop songs side by side, right? They're not the same. When I was in I still am a big REM fan. I loved REM up until a certain album, right? Like then they kind of lost me, which is fine. They grew and I didn't, right? Like I'm not mad when a band goes beyond what I like. But what I loved, talk to my kids about, what I loved about an REM album, right, when albums were still concepts, in my opinion, is that you knew it was REM, but it wasn't the same song over and over again. Even someone like Black Sabbath, right? Like even Ozzy, they all sound like Ozzy songs, but they don't sound like the same song. And you're right, Disney has a musical feel, but not a musical, like there is no absolute, oh, it's a Disney song. Oh, it's the sound. And you can kind of push them together like, Shrek did with It's a Small World and the little wind up toys in the beginning. You can poke fun of it, but you really can't just pull one sound out of it. That's really true. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. If you think of Disney music as like, It's a Small World, right? But It's a Small World sounds nothing like the Main Street Electrical Parade. The Main Street Electrical Parade sounds nothing like the score to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Mm-hmm.
The score for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea sounds nothing like the score for Lion King. Like they're all individual things. Like there's little pockets of things that sound similar, but on the grand scale, it's a huge umbrella. Disney music is a huge umbrella.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Tony says, so Karen often catches my typos, and she said my title was a typo. I'll fix it later. I was doing it very quickly. I feel like I have an excuse this week. I was on the fly, on the road, typing up quickly, setting up eCam. Then I had to run to dinner. Then I had to put this real estate offer. So I'm watching email and doing that. And I'm not a good typist to begin with. This keyboard throws me away. So I saw. So your book stops at Jungle Book, or the title at least, right? And why there? Why that delineation to stop at Jungle Book?
Well, just like everything's a balance of breadth and depth. Like if you write about too much, you're not going to go into any detail, and if you write about too little, you can go into a lot of detail, but you're not going to cover much, right? So I had to kind of arbitrarily set a beginning and an end. And The Jungle Book is the last movie that animated film that Walt Disney supervised, so it seemed like a really convenient cutoff point. And given my age, I know the older films far better than I know the
Right.
the recent films. So
That's interesting.
Well, Jim, I have a quick question for you. As you talk about that, one of the points you had made that I saw highlighted unconventional backgrounds of the early composers that Walt Disney used. And, like how there were some very distinct and unconventional differences in those early film composers. Can you like touch on some of that discovery and what some of those unconventional differences were that may have made a difference in some of those films you're talking about in your book?
yeah, I mean, you can kind of once Disney kind of becomes sophisticated around the time of the late Silly Symphonies and the beginning of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they kind of go into two camps: the people who write songs and the people who do the underscoring. Before that, they're kind of the same people. And like, so the earliest composers, Carl Stalling and Bert Lewis, were both organists that accompanied silent films in Kansas City. So they both knew Walt Disney, or probably, in Carl Stalling definitely knew Walt Disney in Kansas City. Bert Lewis probably knew Walt Disney in Kansas City, but they both ended up in Hollywood working for Walt Disney at one point or the other. Frank Churchill's the first really important songwriter. He writes Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, and he writes the songs for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Frank Churchill played piano in bars in Tijuana, and he also played mood music on the sets of silent films to get the actors into character and so forth. And then you start to get some more traditionally trained composers like Paul Smith and Lee Harleen and Ed Plum, who all like have at least one degree in music, a very formal degree. But those other guys never studied music in college and maybe never even went to college. And then you start to get the generation of people who kind of do a little bit of jazz and a lot of classical, or kind of 50-50. So like uh, Chuck Walcott's kind of the first on that bandwagon, but Buddy Baker is probably the best example of someone who does jazz and classical kind of equally well. George Bruns, I think he does classical. I think he does jazz a little bit better than he does classical, but he's pretty much in both camps and so forth. And so, um, depending on who's working on the project, you can have a completely different sort of color to your score.
That's wild. I mean, this is so fascinating. Like this, and this is why I love Disney. And because the more I learn about Disney, the less I know. Right? Like the less I realize I know, and how much you can go into. Do you still like listening to Disney music? I mean, do you enjoy it, or has it become a
Oh,
job?
oh yeah, no. I mean, my wife is not a Disney person, and early in the process, like you know, about 5 years into the process, she kind of asked me, "Don't you ever get sick of this stuff?" And I said, like, the Disney universe is huge, like, so if you get sick of the animated films from Snow White to the Jungle Book, you can listen to music from Epcot. If you get sick of the music from Epcot, you can listen to Marvel music. If you get sick of that, you can listen to Star Wars music. If you get sick of that, you can listen to the Muppets. If you get sick of that, you can listen to the Fantasyland loop. Like there's really, the Disney universe is massive. And because of that, the Disney music universe is massive. You can have two or three people who all say, "Oh, I love Disney music," but then they can't agree on like what's good Disney music.
What,
That's how big it is.
and I think Disney. Again, Andrew's not here, so send your hate mail to him but mostly Disney. But Disney has a way of putting out some kind of cheesy music, honestly, like maybe a couple parade songs or something in the parks that speaks to me so deeply. But if I took it away, I would be like, what in the world is this? Like, I would never argue for it, maybe,
Yeah,
right? But there are, Once Upon at
right.
Christmas Time at Christmas, at first glance, the lyrics are kind of trite and maybe a little formulaic. And then you're like, wow, this song reminds me of Christmas now. And somehow it seems to fill in the nooks and crannies and seep into my heart somehow. And it's pretty wild.
Well, I've listened to enough of your episodes at this point that, there is this nice thing for the quote unquote Disney adult of allowing yourself to just bask in it, to just
Hmm.
enjoy it for what it is. And there's a sort of a beautiful honesty about that. An honesty that's like not about being cool and not about being hip and so forth. But at the same time, I tell my students that it's a bad idea to avoid cliches. Cliches exist for a reason. Cliches
It's so
work,
true.
you know? And like if you get to the point where you can master a cliche and then you want to say, okay, I'm better than that. I'm going to move on beyond cliches. That's great. That's fine. But don't move past cliches before you
Yeah.
can actually wield them effectively. And so many of the Disney animated films end with a choir, a massive choir, and have this big ending. And so there's tricks they use over and over and over, and they use them because they're effective. And the whole thing of having, you know, animated films with songs in it, they do that because it's successful. If you think of the Disney films that don't have songs in them, generally speaking, they're the ones that people don't watch. The Black Cauldron, Atlantis, et cetera, et cetera. You know, again, many of the Pixar films don't have songs in the same way that Disney films have songs. But that's a different thing, and they have their own success and so forth. But you know, um, Frozen was one of those movies where they just leaned into what they do really well. There's going to be big, massive songs that are going to, really pull you into the story. And, if you're watching Frozen and you turn the sound off, I mean, it's an okay movie, but it's a great movie if you turn the sound on and you blast
Yeah.
those songs.
Right.
J- Jim, here's another one for you because you mentioned you've watched a few of Tater's episodes, and one of the things I love about Tater when he's doing an episode is he almost always has that aha moment where he learns something or something surprises him about Disney. Something, like that's one of the beauties for the Disney purist. Every time we go back, we see something new, notice something new, experience something new that we've never experienced before. And I'm curious, as you did your research, digging into the archives to write your book, what's something you found that you were like surprised by that really just wowed you and knocked your socks off that you were just shocked to learn as you were doing research for your book?
I mean, I'd really have to think about that. That's a big question. I mean, I didn't have to go to the archives to find this out, but one of the things that was most interesting to me is that Cinderella is the film where they changed things a little bit. Before Cinderella, the music was developed before the animation. Like the whole, because
Mm.
if there's a musical beat every time Mickey Mouse takes a step, you need to know the tempo of the music to make that work. And so the animator knows, like, well, if it's at this tempo, we need this many drawings to make that happen. And so it was just a convenient thing to like plan out a whole cartoon to a musical beat so that the animators had a guideline to work with. And because of that, music at Disney is traditionally far more expensive than music for any other Hollywood film because you're paying the composers through the whole process from the very beginning to the very end of it, right? They're doing demos, they're doing all this stuff. Whereas a traditional Hollywood film, the composer just comes in at the end and works for 2 weeks like crazy and finishes the thing off. Well, in the 50s with Cinderella, they decided to plan the songs ahead of time, but the scenes where there's no songs, where it's just a backing score, that they did like a traditional film where they finished the animation first and then they went in and did the underscoring for it.
That's so. What was it like being at the archives? How was that?
Well, it's really cool. I mean, simply because let's face it, you're on Disney property. You're on studio property. And so, I rented a car. So you drive your car in, you go to the security booth, and your name is on the list. You hand them I think I handed them my driver's license, and they did a quick print day pass with my photo on it that I had to wear. But then you park in the parking garage, which is on the same land where the rooftops for the Mary Poppins Step in Time sequence was. Yeah. And then, you have to walk through basically the whole studio to get to the back where the archives are. So you're walking past all these massive sound stages. And of course, when you're doing that, you're walking as slow as possible so you can see everything and so forth. And then, you get into the Frank Wells building where the archives are. And, they have things out in the open before you even get into the archives. Like they have one of the multi-plane cameras out there so you can see it face to face. And they always have like a monthly or a seasonal display case outside the archives. And then you go in the archives, there's more display cases in there. But the room that you're allowed in is basically a reading room. So there's a bunch of books on the wall. There's some display cases that change every season. And they bring things to you. Like you don't go anywhere inside, right? Right. And typically they're giving you photocopies so that, if you mess with them, you're not damaging an original. Like at this point, most of the Disney scores are actually digitized. So if you want to see a score, they put you at a computer and they pull up a PDF and you look at it on the computer. But for a lot of I think I saw some sweatbox notes from, I think, Bambi or something like that, where I think those might have been originals, typed originals, carbon copies, and so forth. But the history of the whole thing just kind of really hits you. And, I say this to people who kind of are maybe feel embarrassed about being Disney adults or what have you. Studying Disney films is really fascinating because Walt Disney was so obsessed with documentation that there is a written record of who had what idea at what time, at what meeting for almost every film. And there's nothing like that for any other film. Think of Wizard of Oz, one of the great masterpieces of filmmaking. And we have no records like that for Wizard of Oz. But for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, we know exactly who pitched what gag on what date at what time and so forth, because he was so obsessed with documentation.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. You mentioned, look, I've never been cool, right? Cool never really got me anywhere. But I will tell you, I think it's interesting, especially, so I'm 55, so people in my generation, that music is our soundtrack, right? Like we were, trying to tell my kids we only had 3 channels, and only one of those had something on I wanted to watch, and I had to wait till next Sunday to get it. But I will tell you this, that my core friend group, and the ones who were in my wedding from church camp for when I was a high school kid, so maybe 10th grade, I met, and I kid you not, I swear on my kid's life this is true, I was walking across this camp parking lot by myself, whistling, and a guy said, "Hey, that's from Robin Hood." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Come with me." And we ended up being friends now for 40 years. Over Whistle Stop Cafe. That one song really, put the best man in my wedding, my best friend now, the people out of my wedding party, 5 of those people really could be traced back to that moment and that song. And would we have ended up friends later? I don't know. Probably. We had a lot of similar interests. But that song was a pivotal moment because that's what I was singing when I was nervous when I was a kid by myself. I'd crawl into that song.
Well, media and pop culture is really important. Like we used to have fairy tales. We don't really have fairy tales anymore. We have television shows, we have movies, we have all this stuff. But this stuff is deeply meaningful to a lot of people. And I was listening to a previous episode of yours, and you were talking about how you make your kids watch these old movies. And for a typical family, you have about a 10-year window for that, right?
Right.
Like when kids are 10 years young and younger, typically the parents are picking out the movies you're going to watch. So you can pick the movies you loved as a kid and say like, hey, we're going to watch this because I loved it as a kid. Once they start getting to be 12, 13, that's not going to fly for most kids. They want to pick their own movies. So that's one of the things why Disney films are so, people like to early on wanted to marginalize Disney because they're making family films. But the fact of the matter is because they're family films, they have a repeatability that other films don't have, because every generation shows those movies to their kids and then they show them to their kids. Like who watches a movie that's like 90 years old, right?
Right.
But people will watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Guess what? It's like 90 years old, And
Isn't that incredible?
It's pretty amazing to have a film that's that old that a lot of people still watch and a lot of young people watch, and that just doesn't happen for most other films other than other family films like The Wizard of Oz, The Sound of Music, things like that, but how many young kids are going to watch, Bridge on the River Kwai or Tora, 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 or, other old films that aren't family films.
We watched Battle of the Bulge the other day, and I haven't seen that in a long time, and I've forgotten how great that film was because it's awesome.
Jim, would you? So you're a composer as well. So you're not just an author. You're legitimately a musical composer as well. So Disney is always evolving. It's never finished. We've had that conversation about Walt's vision time and time again. But if you had carte blanche to go back to any Disney movie in history and compose your own soundtrack for it, what one would you do and why?
Well, part of it is personality. Like I'm kind of I'm kind of a weirdo, and so like I don't think I have the ability to write like really mainstream stuff, right? And so for me, the score that always speaks to me is Paul Smith's score for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
So
To me, that's a really epic score. It's got creepy, weird music that's scary, powerful, and so forth. And that's the kind of thing I think I could do. Could I do it as well as Paul Smith? I don't know. But at least that one, I feel like I'd have a fighting chance. Like if I had to score a film like, Frozen or Snow White or, something that was really upbeat, I don't know. I think I'd scare the kids. But, something like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I would have liked to do Tomorrowland. I mean, who doesn't want that challenge of like imagining what, music in the future is going to be like, and that sort of bright, optimistic stuff that they do in Tomorrowland. That's a film I would have liked to do. But, Black Hole is one of my favorite scores that I feel like,
That's a great.
I feel like maybe I could have done a pretty okay job at that, but that's a really epic score that few people talk about.
And so look, one of my favorite all-time, if I won the lottery, I would hire a theater so that I could do, I want to play the lead in The Music Man. Like I loved Robert Preston. I know the whole thing by heart. So I've always liked musicals. And really maybe don't even know why, right? Like I'm not a student of it. It's not something that always makes sense to me, but I can feel it and know it's there. And so my kids, yes, were raised on these Disney movies, but I think my 20-year-old would probably come upstairs now and tell you that Cleopatra was her favorite movie, and that movie's like 7 hours long. I mean, she
Yeah.
loves that movie, and I'd like to think I can pat myself on the head for being an incredible dad and giving them that, but some of it may have just been circumstance. I don't know, but that, yeah, we play Disney music around the house all the time. Even something like Soarin', which that loop is that I have is 3 hours long. There's no beginning, no end. It's probably only about this much music that repeats itself, and yet I can listen to it for an hour and a half without blinking. I mean, it that little bit of music tells a story. Or Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, that had a great score. I mean, that music tells a story. You know which song is Johnny Depp when he comes in there. You see Jack Sparrow, and I love it. And there's so many
Yeah,
folks who did it who weren't John Williams or Danny Elfman, right? Like those two guys get so much credit for because they're like the Michael Caine. They write everything. But there's so many Disney movies that these little notes that get you that you'll remember forever.
Yeah, my go-to loop is the 1982 Epcot entrance loop. Like that's my jam, but and I do like to put on the Polynesian loop. Sometimes I put on the Coronado loop because that's usually where I stay these days. But yeah,
I didn't realize Toledo's got a Michelin star. I missed that. Did you know that?
yeah, I don't usually like do fine dining at Disney. I'm counter service and keep moving to the next thing.
We've actually gotten to the point we were talking about it. We stayed at the cabins at Fort Wilderness, and we'll talk about that. That to me, I'll tell you what, was like going back to my childhood. Like that's how I remember like vacation spots, and we rented a golf cart. It was really, really awesome. But the food might be more important than the parks to us at this point. Like we could probably go to the resorts and just eat, and it might be okay. All right, so tell us a little bit because I don't want to take too much of your time. The Main Street Electrical Parade. Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the Main Street Electrical Parade is the opposite of It's a Small World, where like It's a Small World, the speakers stay in one place and you move through the music. For the Main Street Electrical Parade, you stay in one place, but the speakers move past you. And it's a theme and variations again. And history that's fascinating because Bob Janney came up with the idea for the parade essentially. And he envisioned music that would sound like Fantasia. But Jack Wagner, the voice of Disney, was like, no, it's got to be something synthesized. It's the new thing. And, synthesizers were really new. And like, not a lot of people do synthesizer music at that point. It was like switched on Bach and that's about it. And so, Jack Wagner looked through his record collection and he found a recording by Perry and Gershon that had Baroque Hoedown on it. And so they grabbed a loop out of it, like a 1 minute, I think it's 1 minute and 3 seconds loop out of it. And they contacted the record label Vanguard and said, hey, can we use this in a parade? And they got a sweetheart deal on it because they had no idea what this was going to be, right? So they take that loop and they, basically come up with Disney themes, synthesized Disney themes, and they overdub on top of it. And then it works just like It's a Small World, where you have this multi-channel tape with every single variation on it, but they're being broadcast to different floats. Like each track goes to a different float. So you have, that float's music is coming out of the speakers if you're on Main Street, but it's also coming out of the float. And as that float moves by you and the next one comes, the next variation fades in on both, the float's always playing the same loop over and over and over, but the building, they fade out the previous variation and they fade up the new variation. And in the earliest generation, that was done manually. Like Don Dorsey was literally on top of the buildings on Main Street,
Wow.
shutting commands on the walkie-talkie. But eventually they figured out how to automate it. So I mean, they had to have an operator there in case the system failed to do it manually. But they had sensors in the street that sense which float is there, and that would cause it to automatically fade up this variation and so forth. And it was the first parade that did anything like that. And someone in the chat earlier said that that approach, the Main Street Electrical Parade approach, is now like the gold standard. Like the default Disney parade has a synchronized score where each parade float has its own music, but that music works in the same tempo and same key as the parade float ahead of it and behind it, so that when you're halfway between the two, it doesn't sound like garbage. It makes musical sense. Everything's synchronized and it works really well. And, it was a really clever thing to do and very advanced for the early 70s. And, we're still doing it today.
Yeah, I think so. Do your students dig into this? Because I do feel like, again, not to keep coming back to cool, which I always wanted to be cool and never was. The thing is like now, like looking at my kids, it's very different. Like you're not ostracized for playing Dungeons and Dragons like I was, in sixth grade. Now it's like a badge of honor, or at least there's a group for you where you're not alone. Like I felt very alone with a lot of my stuff as a kid. And so it seems to me like my son signed up for a class here at Jacksonville that was a Disney class, and he ended up not being able to take it. It didn't fit in with his engineering curriculum or something, but they had a class in college for it, and it's popular. It seems like now it's not like, oh, we're going to listen to Disney music. Kids are like, yes, we're going to listen to Disney music. I mean, how much of your teaching is Disney that you do? Is it a small portion or?
Well, a pretty small portion. I used to teach an online course in Disney music, and I hate to say this, but I think I've taught it for the last time because I'm sick of reading essays that were written by AI. And so I don't want to teach any course that involves writing a paper anymore. If I were to ever teach that course again, I have to come up with a different way to assess it. So but in my courses on songwriting, I of course cover Disney songs at least a quarter of the time because they're, number one, they're really good, and number two, it's what I've researched, so I've got a lot of background on these things and I can go into great detail about them. Like one thing I'll tell you guys that'll blow your mind. If you think of Part of Your World from The Little Mermaid, you may not have realized that that's actually two songs. They're two different songs. Everything up to But I Want More is one song, and then it goes into I Want to Be Where the People Are. That's a different song, right? So the introduction is actually like a verse, and a bridge, and then they abandon that song and then move on to a new song, but we hear it as being one song because we're told it is, right? And we hear it all, but it works so well, like they abandon the conventions of, well, if you're going to do a bridge, then you have to go back to the verse. Well, no, not necessarily. You can just do whatever you want to. So.
Oh, that's kind of wild. And now I'll never be able to unhear that. Like now you say it and that's all I can hear. And
now
again,
you'll have to learn to sing two songs, Tater.
Well, you do not want to hear me sing. I can assure you of that. That's fascinating. Yeah, my wife's a teacher, and everyone's struggling with the AI stuff right now. It's hard. So you teach. Okay, so I did do research though. You created a MIDI with a saw blade. What did you do? Like I saw that and I thought, well, I'm not going to read it.
With a what?
With a saw blade. Like I did some research.
Oh, so yeah. So I mean, this is technical beyond what a lot of people want to do, but
bring it on.
There's a little part called a piezo buzzer. Like you put current through it, it makes a buzzing sound, or it's basically that's the guts of any electronic drum set. It's just a bunch of these little parts that are like attached to a skin and you hit it, right? It's kind of like a tiny little contact microphone is what it is. And because that's how drum triggers work, I figured out, and I'm not the first person to figure it out. I learned this from someone else, that you can basically hot glue them to anything and then input them to like something that takes a drum trigger. And so like I had a plaid jacket that I put a bunch of these so I could kind of like slap myself and be triggering drum sounds. And I had a bunch of circular saw blades set up like a gamelan with them. And, so yeah, it was a fun thing. I haven't done that in a while because you have to do some soldering and I'm not really great at soldering.
That's pretty cool though. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, give me. I won't make you do one, but how about top three? Like, what are your three favorite songs as opposed to loops? But I mean, can you pick three that you just adore?
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna stick with Disney,
Ooh, let's do Disney and then non-Disney. Now I'm really curious.
So the top one I would pick is one that no one ever picks. It's the girl's song from the Jungle Book, My Own Home.
I can play that on guitar. That's one of the few things I can play.
If you look at the lyrics, they are the most depressing lyrics of all time because like this little girl, she's not dreaming of becoming a doctor. She's not dreaming of becoming an astronaut. She's dreaming of having a husband and having a house. Not for it, and the only reason she's dreaming of it is so she doesn't have to carry the water anymore. So instead of being the lowest person in the village who has to carry the water, she's the second lowest person in the village who gets to tell someone else to go get the water. And it's a lullaby. It's also a seduction song. And it's just so odd to have a lullaby and seduction song that's that mammothly depressing, but it's also a really beautiful melody at the same time. So, I have that as a stock answer. Like I've answered that before on other podcasts. No one's asked for the other three. So that one's a little tricky for me to do. And I'm probably going to answer something and then like an hour from now say, damn it, I should have said this. Oh, sorry.
That's exactly right.
That's always true. That happens to everybody.
But I think, it's hard to not think, you know what? This one's clearly my second favorite. Again, a super underrated song. Someone brought it up earlier, not directly, in the chat, from Cinderella, the song, what's the song she sings while she's cleaning? Sing Sweet Nightingale. Yes. Like if you think of that, those are the only lyrics in the whole song, like more or less. I mean, there's a few more than that, but that song and that musical number shows that this poor girl who is being treated like a servant in her own house. She has this rich interior life. Like when she's doing her chores, she has this beautiful dream and she sings this music to give herself joy and pleasure while she's doing this really unsavory task. And it's a really beautiful song that lyrically there's really nothing to it to speak of. I feel like I should pick something more modern for the third one.
No, pick anything you want.
Yeah. Again, you know what? I'm going to pick something from a film that got a lot of bad reviews that it didn't deserve. I think Mary Poppins Returns is a great movie. And I think people just didn't let themselves enjoy it because they were so upset about, it's, not the original and blah, 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 blah. But I think the music to that's beautiful. In particular, the first song, Underneath the Lovely London Sky, is a really beautiful song. And who doesn't love Lin-Manuel Miranda singing it, and the opening scene, it really um, it really is a great homage to, it's as epic as the opening of the original one, right? But it's you know it kind of has that thing of like the difference between the two films is like now we're in the Great Depression, and that song addresses the Depression directly, but basically says, hey, things are going to get better. It's got that Disney optimism to it that, you would have had if the Sherman Brothers did it.
Right.
So I actually feel pretty good about those three answers. That's what I'm going to stick with for my top 3 Disney songs.
I'm,
How about
I'm
you, Hawk?
curious for just the top 3 Disney songs.
Sure.
We don't want to go there.
Oh,
we
okay.
we I'm actually more interested in where he goes for civilian, like non-Disney music.
Yeah, I did.
Now
I
you've
would,
got really
yeah.
intrigued because you've got some great eclectic taste, and I want to hear where you go on the other side. I'm excited for this.
Well, again, the top one is easy to do because I have a prepared answer for that I told people. But the Boxer by, Simon and Garfunkel, what an epic song. And, like the last verse, he cuts him till he cries out, I'm leaving, but the fighter still remains. It's like, it's heartbreaking for a reason you can't really put your finger on, right? It's not really clear who is the boxer? Like none of the other verses mention the boxer. It's only in the last verse that they mention the boxer. Who is the boxer? Is it the same person as the protagonist? Is it someone the protagonist knows? It's this little mystery song. But the whole song is sad, but that last verse is particularly heartbreaking. I'm going to have to go with Beatles for one of them. I'm going to say You Never Give Me Your Money from Abbey Road. Again, it's not a song anyone else would pick typically, but Abbey Road is like an epic, epic album. And, that B-side, see, kids, we used to have records and they'd have an A-side and a B-side. But anyway, the B-side of the record is like all Paul McCartney, where he got into this thing where he would write tiny little short songs and then just string them together, right? And that each one of them on their own is really not much of anything, but in context, they really work well. And I remember the first time I heard You Never Give Me Your Money, because I saw the title of the song and I thought, this is going to be a funny song. Like, it's got a funny title. It's going to be a funny song. But it's a really kind of a sad, heartbreaking song that's really introspective. And so I'm going to go with that for my second song. I guess I'd be tempted to pick a third Beatles song, but that seems like a cliche. I kind of feel like I should pick something else. I'm going to...
Well, Jim, you do synthesized music, right? Correct? That's kind of where your realm is. What would be like a song from that genre that really speaks to you, that you're really amazed by or impressed with? Who's an artist in the synthesizer realm or that speaks to you?
So, the Beatles are probably the greatest band of all time, but if I could choose to have been in any band of all time, it would be Devo. I love Devo. It's like equal parts performance art and music, and it's punk rock, but with synthesizers. So it's this really, and it's video art at the same time. Mark Mothersbaugh is like a fascinating human being. And I'd be tempted to say Beautiful World because the message behind it is really powerful. But their last new album, where it wasn't a compilation of older stuff, I think it came out in 2010 or something like that. It had the second last song on it was There's No Place Like Home. And it's kind of the closest Devo ever got to doing a ballad. And basically it's a song about the environment. And basically the premise of it is that, we're destroying the world that we live in, and probably condemning the human race because of how we're treating the environment. But maybe that's okay because the earth will go on without us, and maybe that's fine. And it's like, again, it's such a tragic statement, but it's done so beautifully as a ballad, but yet at the same time, it has that weird robotic performative thing that Devo does. So it's kind of like it like has its feet in different worlds all at the same time, and I think they pull it off really well. But you know, yeah. So I'm going Devo.
That's so cool. That's
like
so
it.
cool. I'm still, I just love the fact that you picked My Own Home as a song. Like I adore that song. And it was one of the few things that like I struggled through the tab to learn how to play because I wanted to be able to sit in my chair and be able to strum that because I just thought it was just and play those notes. I don't play a lot of lead. Like I'm kind of John Prine, G, C, and D, right? There's no money past the third fret. Um, but that one goes all the way to five, and so the fifth fret. So I really like that. I will say, I was trying to think of myself like if I was trying to pick a favorite song or movie wise. Even though Mary Poppins is such a favorite of mine, I think Jungle Book as a full soundtrack is probably my favorite. The I've been getting in lately, and I didn't mean to, into like the exotica realm. All this really, and so the opening song for that is one of my and my wife's too, our favorite songs. Like I could just play that one song on a loop, just running through, and you close your eyes and you are in India somewhere. You are in a jungle, and a Mai Tai wouldn't hurt you if there happened to be one available. While you're sitting there. Um, but I do think, and I may be dead wrong on this, but I love playing "Feed the Birds" on guitar because I feel like you can. And again, I could be totally off, but it almost feels like you can tell that it goes Richard Robert, Richard Robert, Richard Robert. Like the lyrics and the way the chords change and the music changes, like almost feels like, well, I'm going to write this part and then I'm going to counter your part with this part. It gets a little lighter and a little darker and a little lighter. It's a really neatly put together song for someone who's a complete neophyte in how songs are put together. I just think it's really cool.
Yeah, there's um Robert Sherman had a really rough life, in terms of his experiences in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And he really did bring that darkness that kind of counteracts Richard's brightness in a way that works really effectively. Walt Disney said, "For every laugh there has to be a tear." And, that's one of the things the Sherman brothers were really good at. Like you can't, if it's just happy music, then you don't have any contrast.
Right.
You got to have those sad songs. You got to have those introspective moments so that those happy songs really pop, and that's something they were really good at.
Yeah, that's incredible. This has been absolutely fast. I mean, I could talk to you for
Yeah,
another
this
hour.
has
I
been
mean,
a really
really,
good time.
really cool, man. Anytime you want to come back and I'll just give you the camera and you can just do a lecture for us. So, baby, I would listen for hours. Would you like
Jim,
people to come find you? Oh, good.
yeah, how do we get your book? Like, let people know how to
Yeah.
get a hold of your book. I think it's fascinating information.
Yeah, it's on any major, like online retailer. You're not going to find it in stores unless it's a used copy. But fortunately, there's not a lot of used copies out there. People hold on to it typically. But you're going to find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any major online retailer that sells books, or you can go straight to the publisher, which is University Press of Mississippi. They occasionally have a sale that Amazon doesn't match, but yeah. So
How about online? Do you want people to follow you? Are you interested in talking online?
you can. I'm really bad at posting. I have a Facebook page that's Music and Disney's Animated Features. It's on Facebook. I used to like post like this day in history stuff, but in the morning when you're having your coffee and so forth, I just don't think like, oh, I should look up the this day in history thing and post it. So I should get back to that, but so music and Disney's animated features on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, you could post just one little tidbit a day of something. I mean, because this, I mean, really has been fascinating. I mean, I've been glued to listening to you speak. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So Andrew asked a question in the chat. It's not on audio, but there are ebooks available. So if you don't want hardcover or soft cover, you can get an ebook. But right now, there's no audiobook. I think it would be close to impossible because you'd have to get all the music clearance for it, and that would just be too expensive to do it as an audiobook.
And are you still doing the Bleep Blorp festival that you started? Is that still going on?
Yeah, so we did it last spring. Every other year we do it at my school, and then every other year we do it at a different school. So it's in negotiation for what college it's going to be at next year. But we hosted this past year. It was like 7 hours of synthesized music, 21 performers. It's a fun time, like one of my, every kid wants to have a band, right? Like 4 people, but that's really hard to do because trying to find a space that 4 people can practice in and a time when all 4 people can meet, and then you get a gig and whatever you get paid, you got to split between 4 people. Like I've been pushing my students to think of like the band of the future is 1 to 3 people, because it's much more economical to do that. So like Bleep Blorp is kind of that thing to show how people can, like with drum machines and synthesizers and so forth, basically be your own band. And, so that's the reason why I kind of started it. And also it's kind of genreless, like you can do ambient music, you can do drone music, you can do industrial music, you can do techno music, you can do all sorts of stuff using that technology. And there are people from every walk of life in the greater Boston area doing this, and to kind of get them all in the same space, rather than like it's the same kind of music for 7 hours, it's something I really enjoy.
That's all. We have a guy here. I don't think he plays Keller Williams, but kind of looping, one man kind of show thing, which is really cool. And I mean, you almost, if you close your eyes, you wouldn't know there wasn't a full band there, right? But you're right. Yeah. It's tough. I can't get 3 guys together for too much anything anymore. To start a band and make it's got to be difficult.
And just for Karen's benefit, Jim, you said it was music and Disney's animated features on Facebook.
Yeah, I'll see if I can grab it and put in the chat as well.
Yeah, and post it up on, but mostly Disney too. I'll make sure people get it there. Well, thanks again, man.
This was really cool.
Yeah, I really appreciate. Andrew's gonna be mad he missed this. He's gonna be, but tell him where to find you too, buddy. Because thank you so much for filling in for him.
Oh, no problem. We do Mousecast Tuesday nights at 8:30. Which I ran a little over tonight. Missed the episode. That's okay. Bailing you out. No, we do a, just where the mind meets the magic a little bit, kind of an open format conversational podcast, much like this. We kind of let on Tuesdays, I think it's the second Tuesday of every month, we do an open mic night, kind of let people just pick what they want to chat about, but we'll update on news, talk about some of the different tips and tricks with Disney and different things about history. We bounce all over the place, but we really enjoy it over there. It's a fun night, and we're at Mousecast with a K 2025 on Facebook. You can follow us there.
Here, and I just put the link to that in the chat, or I think I did. I'm about to, and I'll post that over on but mostly Disney as well. And again, for me, just keep coming back on Tuesdays, subscribe to the newsletter, blah, blah. Same old social media stuff everyone says. I'm getting really bad at endings. I didn't really film much in the park. I decided to hang out with my family for a change and film some little stuff, but it was a good time. Buddy. I filmed just enough to write it off, right? Like that's basically, I did just enough work for the tax breaks, but we had a great time. I mean, and that's how I mean, again, I love Disney as a kid, but my family is really what brought all this joy together. And you guys for listening. I mean, you guys come in the chat every week, and I'll get with Andrew about doing a live group call again, and we'll do that because it was fun, and that way it's not just my big head up here talking. You guys can jump in too. So we'll be back next week again, hopefully with Andrew. James, anytime you want to come by, man, just let us know. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, bye, guys.
Our time is too short, it's over now. And we hate to say goodbye, but we'll be back next Tuesday night, or at least we sure will try.